would like to welcome everyone. We are going to talk about, as Linda introduced the topic about real estate and the sustainability challenges in the sector. My name is Reka, and I'm happy that two of our distinguished guests could join us today. Let me introduce you to Pavel Varga, who's the Executive Vice President and the board member at Skanska, Commercial Development, and he's in charge for development projects here in Poland. And next to me, we also have Anna Dubowska, who's the Managing Director of Investment Management at Invesco Real Estate. So I'm happy that we can discuss this topic today. As Linda mentioned before, the real estate is very, very important for its exposure to physical and transitional risks stemming from the climate change. That's one thing, but also the recent energy crisis put it in the limelight and helped us to understand better that the building stock as we have it now, and also the construction sector will play a very, very important role in the future. And the way we are going to have this fireside chat, like we are going to keep it like a little bit casual, since we are only the three of us. We're going to have 3 rounds of questions, but we're going to see where it takes us. First, I would like to raise the topic of what sustainability means as a practice today in the building sector, and we are going to continue with what's the policy agenda, what are the upcoming regulations, and how regulation can help to achieve the sustainability goals in the building sector. And then finally, we will spend a little bit of time to discuss what's the outlook for Poland, and what do we see in the pipeline, and what are our wishes or best case scenario in terms of pursuing the net zero in the building sector. So I will turn to Pavel first to ask about what's the sustainability journey look like at Skanska, what are the ongoing efforts transition.
Good afternoon. The journey Skanska made is having for more than 2 decades. In 2002, Skanska is reporting environmental, social, element in their reporting, and it's an important part of the business. So. This all started in 2002, and actually every building which was built by Skanska since then was to some extent innovative, and we pushed the needle in every development which we had over the last 2 decades. The way we are maybe not good in PR sometimes, we are not recognized enough on that. But for instance, I would like to bring 3 examples of the projects and the journey which we had. One is the building Atrium 1 in Warsaw, which was built in 2013, which is 10 years ago. And that is an example of the kind of forward thinking and applications of solutions which were not common on the market at that time. This building has we have introduced their ground heat exchangers. It's technical description of the cooling and the heating system, which is being used by the soil, by the ground, which is now this system is becoming common recently, mainly for housing, for small housing developments in the form of the heat pumps. We did it 10 years ago, and probably we were at the time a bit ahead of time. It was pretty expensive, I would say, but we wanted to try something new and push that needle, as I said before. And what is occurred, that this building seems to be now one of the most energy efficient and less CO2 emitting buildings, office buildings in Warsaw, if not in Poland. Probably, and I'm saying probably because if we talk about the challenges, I will elaborate on this. Why probably? Why is the challenge on the market with regards to the benchmarking? So that's one example. Another one could be one of the last buildings, which is Generation Park Y, which is the headquarters of PZU company, and that's a good example of kind of maturing market. So we had a great opportunity to being kind of developer who is willing to apply ESG in practice, not only talk about it. We had a chance to work with a tenant who took whole building, the PZU, Polish insurance company, who also had his own green agenda or CO2 reduction, but also ESG agenda. And we were matched on a very early stage, so we could kind of join and really apply solutions which were not maybe typical for the market, and on the other hand, they match both needs of both companies. And that's an excellent example, because we have covered not only environmental aspect. The building is like approximately 25% more efficient than normal office building, let's say normal office building. But also we have applied a lot of social solutions which were kind of aligned with policy of our tenant, PZU. Maybe last example is actually a future building which I wanted to tell, which takes us to another level. I believe will take us to another level of the ESG application. And that's building Warsaw 1, which is at the moment a plot of existing building called Ilmet at Rondo NZ roundabout in Warsaw. And we are at very early stage because we are about to demolish the building, but from very beginning, from design stage, even pre-construction phase, we are really focused on ESG aspects. And what it means in practice. I think I will start with an environmental element, which is the building. There's the existing office building there, which we plan to demolish. But actually, demolish is a wrong word. It's a decomposing of building. We are planning to either reuse or recycle up to 90% of the material of the building, either on site or outside of the building. So we're doing. There is something which was not happening in Poland at least, or maybe even Eastern Europe on this scale. We have scanned whole building, made an inventory, and our team for a couple of months already is working with different partners on how to reuse or recycle the materials of the existing office building. So we will take stone from the elevation, we will reuse glass, we will reuse concrete. We try to keep the underground car park. So that's what means modern ESG. If you're thinking about refurbishments or replacement of the building. And here also there's a social aspect which is connected with unfortunate war in Ukraine, tragic war in Ukraine, which is going to last for almost a year. This building until it will be demolished. It's a place for 500 mothers and children living there. Plus, demolition materials will be sent to Ukraine. So we strive to keep the window panes, partitions, ceilings. These elements we work with external companies to send to Ukraine. So it could be reused, and I think we covered here before we even started the project. We really cover social part of this of ESG. Yes, we're trying to work on it. Of course, that will not end up on that. Once the building will be finished, we're working hard to make it really efficient and open, and to bring back this part of the city to the local community. So.
thank you for explaining to us like how where things stand in Skanska at the moment. And I'm turning to Anna to ask like, how is like sustainability in this? Is it like an integral part of the investment decision that you're making? And if you can just please.
Yeah, so maybe I'd like to take a helicopter view for a moment. Just for explanation, Invesco Real Estate is like a global investment management platform. We invest in real estate directly and indirectly in whole Europe and also in Asia and very much in the US. So we have pretty extensive coverage, and obviously ESG is very high on the agenda today. But like looking at the real estate market, European real estate market, 40% of the CO2 emission globally is coming from real estate, from all the buildings, public, private, privately owned, publicly owned. So there is a massive potential in doing something about that. At the same time, if we look at just European Union produces only 9% of CO2 emission globally. So if you take real estate and the European Union, we're talking about peanuts. But still, I think Europe can lead as an example, and we here in Central Eastern Europe, we have a massive potential as well, because our stock, real estate stock generally is very young. What I mean young is like 80% of that has been constructed within the last 15 years. If we look at Western Europe, 60% of the stock was constructed in the late 70s or earlier. So there is much bigger problem how to reposition and reconfigure the real estate sector as such. And obviously each investor today, especially institutional investor, whenever they are making a decision to put money into real estate or to other asset classes, they will be talking about ESG. Tell us exactly what you guys do, how you assess the building quality, the materials used. So we're going through the massive due diligence process, and Pavel was talking about the technical aspects. But there is a complete mental change, a mental shift in the approach towards the ESG also from the institutional investors, because they also need to show the quota allocated to the sustainable products. And obviously, real estate can be sustainable. The question is whether it can become a net zero by itself, whether ever. You know, the European Union has an ambition target to set 2050 as a net zero. And maybe perhaps with a changing technology it is feasible. But at the moment, we have a massive stock generally, which is old, generally old in Europe, and we have to do something about that. And it is the whole chain from the design stage with the developer, where they are thinking about technical parameters throughout the construction process, embodied carbon measurement, and then during the operational life cycle of the project, everybody has to be focused on those ESG measures. And I'm talking about especially two simple measures. Yes, one is the carbon emission, the other one is energy intensity emission. Those are things that you can measure during the construction, actually during the design even. You can measure during the construction, and you can very much measure during the operational phase. The challenge though is that each party operating the building, starting from the tenant through the property manager through the landlord, have to share the data. They have to know almost real time how much the building is consuming and what we should do to improve that. We have examples in our portfolio that by doing simple tweaks, optimizing the different parameters in the building, you can actually save immediately, without any capital intense expenses, 20 to 30%. And that's exactly what we all should start with. And some investors are very focused on that, and Skanska as a developer is an example of that. But some investors think that ESG is still this regulatory thing. What is it? Yes, we need to report something. There is a lot of greenwashing in the, I don't think it's only real estate sector. Actually, there is a lot of greenwashing what the companies are doing about that. But if you start asking them about, tell me exactly what you measure, how do you measure, what kind of steps are you taking to improve, and they are going, okay, Yeah, it's nice to publish the reports, it's very good, you have to do it, but they are not concrete enough. And I guess we need, the concrete comes from the regulatory side, yes? The regulations have to be more concrete, more precise. What do we mean by sustainable building? Sorry, it was me.
No, I think that this is a great segue also venturing into, like, I think like we heard from you, like what are the key problems that we see emerging that would require some attention from the regulatory side. And like talking about that, like I would be very much interested in both of your opinion, like what do you see like as the immediate problem that needs a solution from the regulators, from the policymakers? What would be the single most important thing to tackle first? If you only need to name one thing that would be
I would say taxonomy applicants, like in introducing this in real life, applying the local regulations, which will kind of try to revert and focus attention, plus help to measure.
I think the measurement standards and data is critical, because even the whole real estate sector has actually two measures at the moment on the sustainability. One is famous green certificate, whatever it is, and the other one is EPC, and the energy performance certificate, which is obligatory in all European countries, actually on all Europe, but they are not standards. So if I have a building which has a C certificate in Poland, this C certificate means completely different thing in, for example, in Germany or in Netherlands. So unless we really standardize that and have the comparative view, this is very difficult to say, like what is good, what is not good enough. And then there's too many variances, too many differences between the national regulations versus what the European Union wants to achieve and to kind of push towards the local governments. For example, in Poland, the EPC certification, this energy performance certification, has to be granted at the design stage. So it's a theoretical analysis how much the building will consume. Great. But nobody measures during the operating life cycle how the building is performing and whether the EPC level is met or not. There are no penalties and no, also positive sides. Yes, if somebody is performing better, that there should be a reward. If somebody is performing worse than a standard, there should be a penalty. Only that way, really people, like investors, developers, all the holistic real estate community would start to look into that truly, because at the moment it's very theoretical, I would say.
I can only support that. I wanted to be very brief. You said one, so. But yes, I mean, benchmarking is if you go to any conference or any kind of practical people who really want to apply it, either in industry or any industry like manufacturing or construction or real estate business, all face the same problem: benchmarking. It's hard to benchmark against the industry, against the norms. And even it's hard to benchmark within one portfolio, the same owner. It's even that difficult because codes change. We are doing exercise for the last 2 years we have built more than a few tens of buildings in Eastern Europe over the last 2 decades, and we have access to the data, and we try to benchmark this, and it's working on the current regulations and norms. It's even hard to do it with one organization.
Yeah, I think the industry is quite advanced because there are tools to benchmark. We work in Europe, we measure for all our assets the consumptions. In Europe we have over 200 assets. And there are platforms which measure the benchmarks between different assets in different sectors. So I can tell you that on average, the typical office building in Europe consumes 220, 250 kilowatts per square meter of lettable area per year. And in 10 years' time, all those office buildings have to be at the level of below 80. That's a quite ambitious target, yes? And And I'm missing in the industry and also in the finance industry a very specific measures how to, like KPIs to which the investor or developer should be obliged to in order to get, for example, more attractive financing or the financing from the European Union funds. We're not yet there, although I think the data is already available. Perhaps not 100% precise, perhaps there are still mistakes people are learning, but there are already good benchmarks to be able to say, okay, the typical, residential in Czech Republic consumes X amount of energy, and typical residential in Poland consumes Y, yes? And why there is a difference, what should be the benchmark?
Just to even complicate it more, is social aspect is also difficult to and hard to measure. And that's element of this ESG governance probably it's easier by kind of introducing some requirements, but the social aspect would be difficult to also measure. But we need to, as an industry or as a government or different organizations, develop a way to do it if you want to. Because there's a saying, you cannot improve anything if you don't measure this, because you don't know if you're moving forward or backward or side to the side. So you need to measure, and we need to start from that.
I recently read a fantastic information from one of our peers, the Pan-European Investment Fund, saying that they have reduced the energy in their buildings by 70%. And there was a little asterisk saying that they only measure the common area in the building, which is roughly 5% of the total lettable area, by the way. So nicely done, but actually they were not collecting the information from their occupiers and their tenants, which means that, of course, there is a nice story, but again, the question is it a greenwashing or is it really true reality? So we have to be careful with that.
I think one thing I would like to also add and mention here is energy is very important, but also our CO2 journey and the role of also governments, but also industry is also.
We haven't touched it.
Yeah, but CO2 is if energy is difficult, CO2 is even more difficult to measure and to control. And we face it at the moment as well. And there are some basic things which could be introduced, like EPDs, obligatory EPDs, so environmental product declarations, which means like every product which is to be implemented or be embedded into a building should have such a certificate confirming amount of CO2 required to manufacture it. So that's something, only few products have it, and only those companies who want to be in this field kind of ahead of the pack and trying to do something about it. But there's lack of products. Even if you want to do a really carbon embedded carbon efficient building, it's very hard on the market at the moment. And that's something which can be done by regulatory. It's not that hard. Some cities have a good examples, like London. As far as I know, there's a requirement on this sort of papers to be produced when materials are selected for construction. So I think there are some easy steps which could be done, which will help to develop a market a lot.
What should I say about this CO2? The European Union has developed a tool for measuring the carbon emission and decarbonization path generally for the real estate industry. It's called CREM. And most of the institutional players, they do apply this CREM. So basically, you put the data into the CREM model and it tells you how much, by when you need to decarbonize. The challenge there is that it is very much country-driven. So for countries which are based on a different source of energy, like green energy, if I take Portugal and Spain, where 70–80% of energy is coming from the green sources, really. And if I take Poland, less Czech Republic, but Poland the most, where the central grid is based on 95% of carbon, you can have the most efficient, energy-efficient building in Poland built by Skanska, but this asset will be stranded day one in terms of transition to net zero, simply because it will very likely be heated, cooled, and ventilated by the central community, like a Warsaw grid, yes? And that's the challenge. Unless the city, the country do not decarbonize the central grid, it is very difficult for the investors to achieve sustainable building from the CO2 point of view. In Czech Republic, it's a bit different. They have a different structure on the grid, but it is very much the cooperation between the central government and the industry to identify the most optimal solutions. And as Pavel said, it's not that difficult. There are really the alternative sources of energy. It's just the regulatory side of things which is stopping us currently at using them, from using them.
I can confirm that we have the same challenge. We of course benchmarked our colleagues in Nordics, in Sweden, Norway, and their energy mix in grid is completely different. They have most of the green energy in the grid, and their so-called scope 3, I'm not sure if you're familiar, but scope 3 is like 50 years or 60 years operational carbon emissions. Looks there zero in Poland. That's much more than the embedded carbon in the building. So definitely, if governments can do something, it's definitely great. I fully agree with that. Also heating, and that's also, we're trying to kind of go around the system, and because heating, central heating in cities is also made of the coal. Yes, so we're trying to kind of to hack the system, let's say, and doing the ground heat exchangers, and that if you buy clean energy, you can kind of get rid of CO2 in an operational stage. But it's complicated and expensive.
Yeah, we have quite a bit of journey here. Like what seems to resonate, I think this is a common topic probably mentioned times before today, that the way we treat data, the way we create that information, how it becomes actionable, we're still at the beginning of the journey, so to speak, and it seems that in the building sector, as you mentioned, the verification and avoiding of greenwashing seem to emerge as like big topics for the future, and it should deserve more attention from the regulatory side of things. One thing, and like it might sound a bit controversial since we both work in the building sector, I came across the International Energy Agency report saying that actually the building sector is the most behind in terms of not being on track to reach the net zero 2050 objectives. But they also mentioned in their baseline scenarios that the building sector has the potential of like between 2030 and 2050 to accelerate the process, since there are very many technologies and materials in the early adaptation stage. So maybe if you are aware of like what are those technologies and like how do you see this journey from into the like let's say immediate future, and what is going to happen in the sector in the longer term? How do you see the statement? Like how do you feel about the net zero transition?
Yes, it's a heavy subject simply because real estate reacts slowly, much slower than the other industry. And obviously, if you take that the whole CO2 emission is mainly real estate, and then the production, 80% of the CO2 emission is coming from those two sources, naturally we are much behind the curve because, you know, if you talk about ESG for services, it's much easier to adopt. We're dealing with the real assets, with existing structures, which are, as I mentioned before, which are quite old and inefficient. So I think the first thing to start with is the awareness, and I guess over the last 3 to 5 years there has been a massive change in building the awareness among different industries, including real estate sector. Yes, because 10 years ago sustainability was about getting the green certificate, which meant nothing. Today the sustainability means all those 3 pillars, yes, environmental, really social, focus on social, and the whole governance and regulatory thing. So there has been a massive improvement, and I think this improvement continues to be seen, and that's great. Also the institutional players, including finance industries, they are much more aware and much more diligent in understanding and selecting their KPIs for lending and investing into different industries. So that's number one. So that started. The second thing is obviously the regulatory side. Okay, being precise, what exactly has to be done. That's great, but how to do it? Yes, we know what has to be done by 2050. We need to decarbonize, but physically, is it realistic? Can we decarbonize real estate sector as such, or would we end with the offset of or kind of off-site production of the green energy? Because it's very unlikely today. And the third thing is the technology. There is a massive acceleration in the PropTech solution, in the technical solution for real estate sector, which are really driving the change. We know about even a Polish company which produces perovskites, which has fantastic potential, because if you are able to find a cheap solution, cheap technology, for example, wrap up the building with something which produces energy, yes, and that solution which would solve our problems, and we would have easy life, but it's not there. So I think awareness, governance, and technology, and once those three aspects are there, we will find the financing for that. I'm pretty sure it's expensive, but there are players on the market who want to invest in sustainable solutions, and I'm sure there will be equity and lending available for those aspects.
I fully agree with that. Something I would also add that we actually need also a new business model. We have to somehow, I'm talking as from the developers, but also lenders' perspective, I believe. How do we apply the investments and gains and share because it simply costs money, so you have to be a kind of ahead of the others on spendings, and how to make it working from the business perspective. That's a challenge, and it's great that funds are getting much more attention to this element. But I think it could progress much faster if we find a new model. The market finds a new financial model for this sort of investment. But I see already kind of good signs of the on the horizon. As Anya said, there's so much change on the market over the last years, not only from the funds perspective but also tenants perspective. If you talk to a tenant 10 years ago, they would ask you what would be return time on an investment, on an upgrade of the building. Now we don't have those questions anymore. We have a question: will it be the saving on CO2 or on the energy, maybe on payments, but they're not looking on a return on investment, but rather they understand that this is something which is in line either with their policies or with the way they want to run the business. So that's changing, and also we also see first tenants who's coming to us and saying, look, we want to have whole building for us. What it takes to be zero net carbon emission level. Let's say, yes, and that's so still, as I said, there are ways around it. And we have such a discussion already, which was not happening a few years ago. I was always counting on this. I was always supporting in my company to prepare a product for such a tenant, because I believe that at some point somebody would like to pay extra to get this clean product. And we see some first signs that tenants really thinking about it. They're able to pay extra for clean buildings, clean, of course, I'm thinking about energy efficient and low carbon emissions and social responsible buildings, and these are some good signs of the changes on the market, I would say.
Yeah, that's encouraging. Like seeing the kind of from the demand side, getting the awareness and like getting the first steps. And the demand side is like probably neglected in the conversation. We received also a question that I found very interesting. it asks if, so how do you see the potential in the Central Eastern European region to fulfill the objective of reducing the emissions of the buildings until 2030 by at least 60%? Because this is the baseline scenario that the International Energy Agency assumes it's in its net zero 2050 scenario. How do you see the chances and what are the potential barriers you see? If we talk about like more narrow.
Yes, so we at Invesco, we have also our carbon emission targets, and by 2030 we're supposed to reduce the CO2 emission by 50% compared to the baseline from 2018. Which means that we need to reduce energy emissions slightly less by that time. I think the real estate market is prepared to undertake those capital investments because they know that otherwise the product will be obsolete. And the more investors are asking about that, and they are ready to invest because they see that those tenants in a moment will be asking only for the maybe not net zero but a very efficient building. So they understand that they need to invest in order to get better return on the investment and get the cash flow in the future. I can give you an example from France. France has just passed the law saying that by 2027, if the building, any building, doesn't meet the criteria on EPC, I think this is number C certificate, they cannot be lettable, they cannot be operated, so they need to be empty. So landlords have no choice but to invest. So we're ready to invest. Developers will find better solutions. The investors will also retrofit the buildings. The issue is still with the central carbon grid, because I don't think without the massive acceleration that Poland can get the different greener sources of energy into the grid. Not at least with what is being said today by our government. I don't think there is enough attention put to the green solution, alternative solutions. They are there. They are wind farms, they are solar farms, they are there. It's just the matter of pushing them and making sure that all the city grids, all the central grids are decarbonized, and then it's much easier. So I think it's feasible, but it requires the cooperation and massive push from both sides, investors and the government.
Yes, definitely. But, I think there's a difference, as I just said, between existing stock and new properties, the new stock. I mean, new stock, I'm talking about new buildings and being developed, it's easier to apply new solutions, I guess. On the grid, for instance, as I also thought you mentioned perovskites or photovoltaic also, with interesting data, we have made an estimation to the building I was mentioning before, a tower in Warsaw, W1. If you want to provide only energy from photovoltaic, you would have to take 3.5 hectares of photovoltaic, which is not feasible in the city with current technology. And even if it will be more efficient in the future, it will never kind of fully offset. I mean, it will fully cover the requirements of the buildings in case of the kind of dense city developments. We have to figure out something else, like a grid is the answer. We need to have a clean energy in the grid first.
The other question that seemed to be like, it's a cluster of questions actually, like we are receiving quite a few questions on the Slido. Very happy for that. So a lot of our participants are actually interested in the incentive schemes. Like, is it something where the government would have like a bigger role to see through procurement processes? Like, how do you feel about that? And maybe you can answer this in comparison to the private financial sector, like whether banks are doing enough, whether there are other financial sector participants who should be doing enough to create more incentives in terms of development.
So let's start maybe with this financial subsidies. I will leave the procurement to Paweł. In Germany, for example, there is a system of the cheap loan financing called KfW, if I'm not mistaken, whereby you can get almost 0%, like a reduction in your interest on your loan, significant money, several million euro for the scheme, which meets certain criteria, meaning both the local, the social aspects, and also the environmental aspects in terms of materials used, in terms of energy intensity plant. You can get a massive incentive, and actually your cost of finance can be cheaper by half. That's a lot in today's world, where the cost of financing is around 5.5% for euro, and not to mention what it would be for Polish zloty. But that's a lot, and that's where the government steps in and says to the developer, to the investor, if you do X, Y, Z, we're happy to cut down your interest on your loan financing by half. Maybe I'm not an expert, but I haven't seen anything similar in Poland, neither from the banks nor from the alternative lenders. Of course, there are some green financing available, but the difference between the regular market financing and green financing is relatively immaterial. Yes, so it is not enough boost for the investor to be super creative and find the best solutions. Maybe invest something more, have a better, more expensive materials, because there is no incentive. And that's where the role of the government and the state is generally, to incentivize the owners and the landlords and the developers to reposition and to develop products which are much more sustainable. So one area for the lenders would be definitely here on procurement.
Should I understand the question? Procurement on the public sector?
Yes, like in general.
I am not specialized in public sector, but I can maybe elaborate on this on behalf of my colleagues from construction business, construction, general contractors. So definitely the company works on a green solution, and where it's applicable, it makes sense. But of course, at the moment, public sector tenders or bids are focused on prices and meeting the requirements, not exactly ESG being one of them. So definitely introducing this element to the procurement process would definitely help to transform the whole industry. As long as it will be clear, measurable way, if it will be done properly, definitely it will help. Definitely. Because we already also on our construction sites where we hire our general contractor, we are thinking about really green solution, like electrical machinery, for instance, something which is unbelievable, but like the diggers and all the machinery can be actually electrical fed, and it has a lot of advantages, not only the environmental aspect. So yes, so this industry needs acceleration, and definitely procurement would help.
Looking at also the questions, there seem to be quite a few questions coming in where is heat pumps the future? Having a larger share of heat pumps, or is it going to be some other solution combustion method as a positioning in the buildings? And I would maybe expand this question with are there some of the success stories that might have? Do you see some of those that should be scalable, that can help us right now?
So let's start with the scalability, and Poland and generally CE right now is a center of logistic development. Like everybody builds logistic. We were supposed to have Panasonic. It's fantastic opportunity. All the investor wants to own logistics, but if you look at the roofs, those logistics are not necessarily having the photovoltaic roof. So it has been calculated that if you're able to cover a roof of the logistic with photovoltaic and a bit nearby, you can secure between 50 to 60% of the energy consumption for that location. If you add the heat pump on that, maybe you're not net zero, but very close to net zero, yes? With what Pavel was saying about city center locations for the office building, hotels, residentials, it's much more difficult because it is very unlikely that the heat pump would solve, or photovoltaics would solve all the requirements. So this would need to be supported with the green grid solution, or something else, the new technology, which I'm sure will come into force within the next 3 to 5 years, which would allow the building to produce on-site energy in a different form. Otherwise, we're ending in a, private partnership, like for the PPA's agreement for the delivery of the green energy, where the investors would contribute to building the photovoltaic farms elsewhere, or buying forests, or whatever solutions there are, investing in the wind farm. But again, there are no regulatory regime at the moment which would support really and facilitate those solutions, yes? Because I don't think the building with today's technology, the city buildings can be zero emission, like they can be net zero. It's very unlikely with the current technology, but maybe in 10 years' time the situation will be totally different.
Yes, I can agree with that, and just to add, there is no silver bullet, as Americans say. There's no one solution. Heat pumps, this is one of the solutions, but from our experience and our studies shows that things we should start with is the energy efficiency of the whole building, which is facade, efficiency of the equipment inside, controlling management of this equipment. That's something we are also focusing. So there is no one element. Facade glazed, fully glazed facade, which is currently used in office buildings, is not very sustainable. I mean, unfortunately, and we are trying to kind of looking for ways to really slightly come back to 90s, where the walls of the external walls of office buildings were not fully glazed. Because without that, we will never reach that. That's one point. So we need to start with the efficiency operating of the buildings, and heat pumps can be one of the solutions, which is if they are fed from the photovoltaics on smaller buildings, I mean not high-rise buildings. It might work to some extent for heating. But as I said, for instance, management of the systems, we are now testing new technologies which are coming to the market. For instance, on the cooling and heating works only in the rooms where people at the moment. After COVID, the offices looks like as they look. They are not so crowded, but people still come, and they kind of migrate in different parts of the offices. So we're working on the solutions which will measure the amount of CO2, measure amount of measure temperatures and so on. So we will supply minimum, not minimum, but what is really needed for this space. At the moment, technology doesn't allow for that. There are some settings from the designers or facility managers which will do, and you kind of probably lose a big portion. The majority of the energy or fresh air could be saved if you do it smart. So there is, as I said, there's no one single bullet, and heat pumps is one of the solutions.
And this is interesting what you said about this glazed facade, because on one hand we would like to go back to the 90s with more walls because it's more energy efficient, but on the other side we have this S aspect, yes? Human being in the building and their comfort, their physical and mental health, and the amount of light they should be getting naturally, and the environment that they would like to work with. So everything has to be balanced, because you just cannot focus just on the environmental issue, because in the center there is still a human being. Real estate is being built for humans, like any real estate actually.
Yeah, that's a positive message worth mentioning when you talk about the sector. question left about mindfulness platform.
Here.
Hi there. I'm interested to know how you're looking at physical risk in your own portfolios, because we've talked a lot so far about energy performance, regulation, a lot of big topics which actually you probably can't resolve yourselves. But within your own portfolios, how do you look at physical risk? Because at SEB Global, we're helping a lot of banks, investors, real estate firms understand physical risk and the financial impacts of physical risk on a real asset. So how do you guys do that?
Thank you for the question. It's a very good question. So what we do at Invesco, there are platforms, there are softwares available to show us exactly the location and the risks associated with the micro-location. So we're working with a company which is actually called 24/7, but also I know MSCI has a similar index, AXA has a similar index, assessing the real estate, the physical risk for real estate. We're looking at, I think, 4 factors. We're looking at the heat stress, we're looking at the water stress, we're looking at the wildfire stress, and we're looking at the something else, but I forgot that. Flood I mentioned,
Yeah,
fire, flood, the heat. Earthquakes might be cyclones. Earthquake is more for different regions, for Asia, but here in Europe might be the wind type of element. So, for example, our portfolio, we have quite a lot of assets in the Netherlands, and obviously the flood risk goes very high, but we also are looking what the cities or the regions are doing to mitigate those risks. But obviously, as part of our investment management, like investment decision process, we look at the climate risk, and it is very unlikely that we would invest in a location which is very high on all those bars. Fortunately, in Europe, we don't have that much issue with the wildfires in the southern part of Europe. Yes, the flooding is controllable, but there are also different risks coming, which I think will need to be looked at. Yes, even the grid, the composition of the grid for different regions is an important risk factor to take when we're making investment decisions. Yes, for example, in CE we didn't used to have any wind, any cyclones, any hurricanes, and these days we have that. We have heavy rainfalls which affect the property market. So I think this would need to be developed, but there are tools to look at that, and I'm happy to share afterwards.
I'm asking because we cover 7 physical risks, so if you're looking at 4, maybe we can talk about it later.
Oh yes, very good then. Thank you.
Jakub Frejlich, JLL. I kind of want to challenge, because you mentioned that there is no technology yet. Fully agree. But the sustainable asset strategy needs to incorporate that we need to survive until the technology is there. I mean, we need to find a way until the technology is there, not wasting time in the meantime. We mentioned, and we're much more talking about it in the banking part, that from taxonomy and all other resilience banking strategies, we in Poland in real estate will be less attractive given the grid you mentioned. Mm-hmm. And we will be out of portfolios soon, to some extent. So we need to find a way. And the sustainable asset strategy needs to incorporate that. I fully agree that on the intense populated area like city center, you cannot have solar, but you can buy an off-grid. Buy an off-grid.
Yes, but it doesn't classify as a green solution, so you can buy the offsets, of course.
I'm not saying offsets. I'm talking about buying physical asset.
I'm not sure I understand.
To buy a farm.
Oh right, yes, but that's still still an offset. Because
Kind of.
You're creating.
Of course.
That's
for
why
an
it's going. Oh, you're right. So Couple of things. First of all, it's not that the industry has been doing nothing, because
I know. I want to raise the temperature in the room. I'm not challenging that you are not right.
So at least for our portfolio, we've been able to save without heavy capex improvements, roughly 30% on our portfolio in Poland. So that's the step number one. Also with the help, with the investment help of our tenants, that's interesting. Second of all, there are solutions. Investing in a farm, PPAs, buying the forest, but these are all offsets. These are all offsets because your building is still producing CO2. It's great that you have created the positive balance somewhere else, but your building here is still producing CO2 emissions. So how to go about that? So there are certain ways. What I was just saying, that with my knowledge, and I'm not a technical expert, with today's technology, it's impossible to get the physical building to get to net zero.
I fully agree with that. Yeah. For now, yeah.
For now, but maybe it will change. And the grid has a massive implication for that. The grid has a massive implication.
Right. The grid emission rate in Poland is 0.7 ton per megawatt hour. In Germany, it's 0.35, so it's half. For a heat grid in Warsaw, it's 0.31 per megawatt hour, and because it's based on coal and gas. And I fully agree that it creates much greater challenges than in Western Europe, which is a bit better decarbonized, to say the least. But this is a huge challenge for portfolios here, because we will soon become stranded.
We are stranded there. All of our assets in Poland, I'm almost 100% sure that every asset which would be put into the grand model would be stranded there because of the grid.
We've done various analysis in various portfolios, like 60 to 70% is stranded already.
And the next ones will be stranded in 2 years, yes?
Yeah, very soon, yeah.
So that's what I'm saying, yeah. Okay, fair enough. I would like to hear more about the alternative solutions.
I'm happy to share.
Yeah.
Definitely, there's a role to be done, and we know it very well because we that's our everyday struggle. Let's say not struggle, but work of our teams, and we face this challenges every day. So we know this. But the only thing we can do is to try to be ahead. Yes, so that's what we do, and counting the industry also to do this. And I know they do it. We know that everybody in the industry is talking about it, tenants are talking about it, so I'm sure that will be there.
Thank you. Agnieszka Smoleńska, I have one question coming to this sustainable finance topic a little bit more. Okay. Sorry. Little flash in the eyes. So our CBI colleagues are gone, but according to their data, 30% of global issuances of green bonds come from buildings. In Poland, there have been some attempts to have green bonds from developers, but very small and very limited. And I just wanted to ask you about the potential of green bonds. We've been discussing at the previous panel a lot about developing different segments of financial products. What do you think what is the potential for green bonds in real estate space in Poland, or alternatively other types of products that are sustainability linked?
I'm not sure I should answer this question because I'm pretty skeptical about green bonds and issuers of the green bonds, and also the lending industry, because from my experience, and this is pan-European experience, is that the KPIs, the targets, are very vague. They are simply very vague targets. Okay, you need to have a certification for the building good, and you need to have your strategy around ESG on paper. But nobody challenges that. Nobody measures really the physical intensity, CO2 production, including the development phase. Very little measurement is done during the embodied carbon emission during the development. So I think that obviously in Poland and in C there is a great potential to provide such an opportunity, but I think there has to be a market which is more transparent, what is defined to be green, first of all, and there has to be an attractive price difference between in the financial market between the regular financing available and green financing available. Yes, there has to be an attractive pricing difference. And what is attractive pricing difference? I don't know. I gave you this example from Germany, but I don't know what would it be, 50 bips, 100 bips. I have no idea today. But I'm missing the bit with the clear definitions. You need to achieve certain KPIs. You need to achieve certain emission. You need to consume during your construction X, Y, Z embodied carbon. This is not being done today, and I don't think. Therefore, this market is developing that quickly because nobody really knows how to define those fundamental objectives or KPIs around sustainability. Sustainability-linked finance is about corporates having the ESG strategy. That's all about that. But do we really measure how they perform? I'm not sure.
Okay, well, I mean, we use our internal financing, so we are not specialists in issuing bonds, but this is why what I fully agree with Ania that in general the benchmarking, the comparison of the transparency of the market that's a big challenge for the development of this market. Also, not at issuance of the bonds, but also at investing and also on leasing. So I think transparency and kind of clear rules would really help everyone in this market. All the players, tenants, investors, banks, developers.
I haven't seen any developer or any company issuing bonds saying, I will be in the 10 or top quartile or 10% of the best performing energy intensity assets in the market. Because even there is no data to measure them. I haven't seen anybody saying, all my portfolio will be at B, at XYZ kilowatt per square meter. I haven't seen such a specific measurement criteria. I've seen the criteria around, yes, we have ESG strategy, yes, we are conscious about the environment, yes, we are conscious about social aspects. But that's it. So I'm not sure whether we answered the question. Probably didn't answer the question. Sorry.
Thank you.
I think this was like plenty of answers. And I think it's also a good way to kind of transition to the next panel, because I think like far too many of these topics were echoing the banking segment, talking about the issues when it comes to KPIs and actionable transition plans. Thank you so much for
Thank you very much.
We will have a short break and then we'll be back for the banking panel, because I think we have some other people who have arrived who are outside making a bit of noise, so sorry about that.
Around